Good evening and welcome, everyone. My name is Trent Sendler. I'm here with the St. Louis Public Library. Thank you for joining us for our first of three spring lectures of the 2023 Society of Architectural Historians St. Louis chapter and the St. Louis Public Library Steedman Architectural Library Lecture Series. Tonight, John Guenther will be presenting Gyo Obata, Architect. John C. Guenther, FAIA Lead AP, has produced a distinguished body of architecture that contributes significantly to the built environment, with projects ranging from adaptive reuse of historic landmarks to new projects that fit comfortably into their physical, environmental, social, and historic contexts. His work has received over 50 national, regional, and local awards from the American Institute of Architects and a diverse array of professional organizations, civic groups, and publications. John serves as the president of the Society of Architectural Historians, St. Louis chapter. As an architect, John seeks to contribute through his designs and architecture which serves and ennobles our lives, works with the environment, and enhances our world. As a historian, he recognizes that we stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before us. Tonight, John will present Gyo Obata, Architect. Gyo Obata, FAIA, was born February 28, 1923, died March 8, 2022, left a truly great legacy as an architect and as a person. His accomplishments are legendary, having been one of the founding partners of Helmuth, Obata, and Kassabaum, HOK, in 1955 in St. Louis, Missouri, with 3 founding partners and 26 staff, helping to grow the firm into today's highly successful global design, architectural, planning, and engineering firm, with over 1,600 professional staff in 26 cities around the United States and the world. Throughout his architectural career, Gyo stressed the importance of listening carefully to the client. His philosophy was simple, straightforward, and powerful. Listen very carefully, understand what people want, work hard, and find the best ways to enhance the quality of life around you. Tonight, John will review important works of Gyo Obata and his colleagues at HOK. To better appreciate Gyo's works, it's important to have a sense of his early life influences, education, and professional experiences, leading to his later architectural designs and career of over 7 decades. And now, please welcome John C. Guenther, FAIA Lead AP, as he presents Gyo Obata, Architect. John?
Trent, thank you very much for your kind introduction and welcome everyone. It is a very, very appropriate that we talk tonight, and I thank you all for joining us tonight for Gyo Obata, Architect. It's a distinct privilege to give this talk tonight, and this date is especially poignant, February 28th, as today Gyo Obata would be celebrating his 100th birthday. It seems appropriate to honor and celebrate Gyo, his amazing life and accomplishments with this talk tonight. And with that, I am going to minimize and move myself off screen here, and I hope that you all can see the full screen as we proceed. So I think it's an important touchstone to begin with, Gyo's design philosophy, and that is to provide spaces which are not only functional, but enhance the quality of life for those who work and live in them. He also begins with light. The language that architects use to define space is daylight. He was always looking for new innovative solutions that were unique to the problem, that solved the problem to the best possible resolution. So with that, each project offers new potential for discovery, for understanding the site and program, and an opportunity to do a thoroughly designed building that will bring meaning and enjoyment to the people who occupy it. And my favorite quote, which we just heard, but needs to be repeated often: listen very carefully, understand what people want, work hard, and find the best ways to enhance the quality of life around you. So in an overview of Gyo's life, Gyo was born February 28th, 1923 in San Francisco. And here you see a series of photographs of him and his family. He attended the University of California, Berkeley in 1941, and then in 1942 to 45 transferred to Washington University here in St. Louis to receive his Bachelor of Science in Architecture. After that, he graduated and went on to Cranbrook Academy of Art, Bloomfield Hills, to study under Eliel Saarinen to get his Master's of Architecture and Urban Design. He was also drafted and served in the U.S. Army 1946 to 47, and upon completing that returned to work at SOM, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill in Chicago, and then moved afterwards to 1951 to 55 to Helmuth Yamasaki Lineweber in Detroit, Michigan, spending a great deal of time in St. Louis, however, with their project here, the Lambert Airport Terminal. And then in 1955, established Helmuth, Obata, and Kasabam as a founding partner. And here you can see in the lower left his mentor, Minoru Yamasaki, and Gyo in 1952, and his parents, both wonderful artists, Haruko and Shira Obata in the center here, and his family to the right. Now, a bit about his family, his parents, Shira and Haruko Obata, both really distinguished artists, he in painting and she in the art of ikebana, of floral arrangements, which she introduced to the West Coast. Mr. Obata studied and was quite proficient in sumi-e style of Japanese black ink print painting, which you see several examples here, and painted the beautiful California landscapes, which you see across the top here in an elegant, almost minimalistic style, but quite beautiful. He was also a professor at the University of California, Berkeley in the 1930s, and off to the left you see his classroom there. And he and his wife operated Obata Studios, 25 Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley, California as well, where they taught classes in painting and floral arrangements, as well as offered art supplies there as well. And then, and here's a picture in the lower right of their marriage in 1912. Of course, there are also these paintings in the center of Topaz, the detention camp in 1942, which we'll talk about in a moment. With World War II breaking out and with the attack on Pearl Harbor, things changed drastically, and FDR issued the executive order 9066, in which internment camps were set up, and the Obata family was taken to the Tanforan Detention Center in San Bruno, California, in 1942, April. And you see it off to the left. It was actually a former racetrack. But Mr. Obata always believed in the power of art in teaching. And here you see him teaching the children of the camp here to learn about beauty and the natural surroundings. And he was a great lover of nature, and that kept spirits high. Later, the family was sent to Topaz Relocation Center. This was in Topaz, Utah, up in the mountains. And these are a note to a friend about his first day of arrival there, noting the heat, 110 degrees, with the next day being 40 degrees in the morning. And then an absolutely stunning painting to the left of Moonlight over Topaz, 1942, which is a watercolor on silk. And it just seems so ethereal and environmental, with the mist rising up there. Just a magnificent painting here. This is another painting at Topaz, New Moon, 1943. So he was, as I say, a great lover of nature and the beauty of the surrounding mountains, and obviously the camp is in the foreground, which is constantly in his paintings. And as he recorded these events of his life and his family's life and his fellow Japanese American citizens, not allowed to have cameras or anything like that. So his art form also served as a way to record the events. Another painting of the center by Moonlight, 1943. And I love this. This was actually a New Year's address to his school. And in it, he talks about the sun and the moon have been shining for tens of thousands of years, blessing this world. And also that we only hope that our art school will follow the teachings of this great nature, and that it will strengthen itself to endure, like the mountains and like the sun and the moon emit its own light. So a very spiritual statement, one steeped in the love of nature and art to elevate one's spirits. And in fact, he talked about these paintings later in life as This was his way of showing his gratitude to nature and a way of keeping himself grounded in hope. And interestingly enough, ever the optimist, it seems to me, he said, if I hadn't gone to that kind of place, I wouldn't have realized the beauty that exists in that enormous bleakness. So always seeking out beauty wherever he was. Now, in terms of Chihiro's life, I mapped it here on this Google Earth here, and you can see he was born in Okayama, Japan, 1885. Then the family moved to Sendai, and this was in 1890 when he was about 5 years old, and then he began studying sumi painting at that point in time when he was 7. Later, he traveled to Tokyo, and there he continued his study of art. He was about 14 years old at this time in 1899, and he apprenticed under great artists there and learning even more about sumi ink and brush painting. However, in 1903, he decided it was time to depart for America, and off he headed to California. So with that, he wanted to come into contact with a larger, great nature, quote unquote. He was 18 years of age and made his way ultimately to San Francisco. And here settled in 1903, finding work initially as a domestic servant. In 1906, he sketched the earthquake that had happened, the great earthquake in San Francisco. In 1909, he's a farm laborer up in Sacramento Valley. And even doing that manual labor, he was still taking in the beauty of the surrounding lands. He was an illustrator for newspapers, commercial designer, worked for designs in department stores and so on and so forth. And in 1912, he married Haruko Kohashi. And then in 1915 to 17, continued as an illustrator and designer for various magazines, producing 3,000 illustrations. His goal ultimately was to study American art and then continue on to Paris to study European art. Now, beginning with the Obata family in San Francisco, I thought it would be interesting to map the lives and travels of the family this way. So here again, we are in San Francisco with the Obatas, with him teaching, and with the Obata studio. Pearl Harbor breaks out is in December 7th, 1941, FDR Executive Order 9066, with the forced removal of about 120,000 Japanese Americans on the West Coast relocated to inland centers. Initially, the Obama family was here in San Bruno in Tanforan in April of 42. But the night before that happened, and at the assistance of Gyo's father, he was accepted to Washington University in St. Louis. So the night before his family went to Tanforan, at the age of 19, Gyo transferred to Washington University in St. Louis. And then after that, about 5 months later or so, the Obata family is transferred to Topaz, to the Warley Relocation Center there in Delta, Utah. But about 11 months afterwards, they are allowed to leave that camp and then head to St. Louis, where they were reunited as a family in Webster Groves in 1943. Gyo, upon graduation in 1945 in St. Louis, headed up to Bloomfield Hills, up to Cranbrook Academy of Art to study under Elio Saarinen. His father was reinstated as an art professor at UC Berkeley and headed back to California with the family. And after graduation from Cranbrook, Gyo served in the Army in ADAC in the Aleutian Islands, 1946 to 47, seemingly halfway around the world. And then he made his way back to Chicago to work for SOM from 1947 to 51 after his service in the Army. But then he was attracted to the opportunity to work with Yamasaki, and so went to work with Helmuth Yamasaki and Lineweber in Detroit in 1951 to 55, where he collaborated with Minoru Yamasaki. But most of the time he actually spent back in St. Louis working on the St. Louis Lambert Airport, 1951 to 56, which Yamasaki had designed the initial terminal. And then, as we know, in 1955, HOK is established, and he is one of the founding partners. And it's interesting to think about how history affects everyone's lives and how it changes perhaps the course and what results from that. And so actually, Gyo said, actually, at the time, I thought I would just be here 2 or 3 months and then I'd be back at Cal again. And as it turned out, it changed my life completely. In order to move to St. Louis, First Congregational Church of Webster Groves actually helped the Obata family relocate to St. Louis, finding them a house in the area. And this is the house, 1943 to 1945. This was where the Obamas live, the Obatas live. And this was at 540 Summit Avenue in Webster Groves. And I had the opportunity to visit this house and photograph it a few weeks ago. This is a photograph of the family gathered in the living room of that home. And Gyo's father painting in the home here, painting a floral arrangement from flowers that he had picked in the yard. And while I was there, the owners were there, and they graciously allowed me to talk to them a little bit about the house. And they showed me a board that they found when they were renovating the lower level, and they had removed a wall, a partial bookshelf. And when they took the bookshelf out, on the backside was George K. Obata. And so the homeowner graciously showed this to me. And I asked Kiku about it, and she said, well, that was her uncle, George Kim Obata, who was Gyo's older brother in 1913 to 1986. And so this is where Kim lived when he was in St. Louis and working here in St. Louis. So it was interesting to find this artifact, and I appreciate the homeowner sharing this with us. So I did a little research on Kim Obata and found he had a very wonderful and productive life here with graphic design. He along with co-founder Alice Hausner, they co-founded Obata Studio. She had gone out, she had worked at Garrison Wagner and then decided to open her own firm, had so much work that Kim Obata joined her, and then they formed Obata Studio in late 1945. And initially, they actually had an office on a riverboat paddle wheeler on the levee of the river, as you can see here. And this was basically facing what would become the Gateway Arch, but at that point, everything had been cleared in anticipation of Eros Saarinen great arch being constructed here. And then later on, they moved, and you can see, by the way, in the upper right-hand side, a view of the design studio on the second floor of the paddle wheeler. They then moved on land, so to speak, and into the city, and into the Roosevelt Federal Savings Building, 1952. And a little while later, Gyo opened the offices for HOK in that same building. As you can see, Obata Studios had a blue chip list of clients here, working with Rice Chex here and Busch Bavarian Beer, Anheuser-Busch, and Alice Hausner actually painted the original mountain scene here in 1955. Kim Obata, a really accomplished artist and in his own right, produced this beautiful watercolor rendering for the new terminal that was under design here with Yamasaki and Gyo. Then in 56, they relocated into the Delaney building, and soon the offices were expanding again. And then you can see the blue chip list of clients continues with Monsanto, Emerson Electric, Pet Milk, and so on. And they developed all of these graphics and logos for these companies. Kim eventually headed up an office for Emerson Electric in Tokyo and returned to Japan in 1966. The Obata family is really a very talented and creative family, and that continues with Kiku, Nori, and Gen Obata. Kiku has her own office here in St. Louis and also in London, and is a wonderful designer, and they focus on a wide range of works with identity, brand strategy, printing, wayfinding, signage, environments, architecture, retail, campaigns, packaging, and digital, and so much more. So it's great that she is here producing such beautiful work. Nori produces a wonderful porcelain ceramic tableware. We actually have several pieces of her work as well here. And Gen is an artist in Tacoma, Washington, in various media, in fiber art and drawings and paintings, and also a songwriter and musician. And Max Obata, Gyo's youngest son, has just opened his own office in San Francisco, Obata Noblin. And this is after his various experiences in various firms, including Snow Heta in San Francisco. And with that, we'll return to Gyo Obata and his education here in his early formative years, studying at Washington University and being allowed to transfer here in 1942 to 45 with Dean Langsdorff welcoming him and about 30 other Japanese American citizens who wanted to study here at Washington University, one of the few colleges in the country doing so. And then upon his graduation, as I said, he moved to Cranbrook Academy of Art to study with Elio Saarinen, which you see off to the right, a sketch of Cranbrook. One of the great lessons of Elio Saarinen was to remind people of the scale in design. Always design a thing by considering it in its next larger context. A chair in a room in a house in an environment in a city plan. So everything was interconnected, and you always needed to think about the scale and design of each element as you worked your way up the scale. So Gyo's thesis in 1946 was a study of St. Louis, an urban design study. And here you can see his diagrams of analyzing the region, so beginning sort of in the macro scale and working his way into the fabric of the city of his proposed design. And so here he's analyzing the economic region, the people, the estimated growth and distribution and so on, employment centers, and then transportation with railroads and freeways and so on and so forth. And then eventually working his way down to the finer grain of the township unit with 8 neighborhood units clustered around this township here. And so you can see everything carefully planned with traffic flowing through freely and creating pedestrian-free zones within. And here you see the nucleus of this plan, and this is planned to serve 8,500 families in this township unit. And it's a very interesting mixed-use plan, including high school and using their auditorium, not only for the high school, but for a civic function as well as the gymnasium. So everything was sort of multi-purpose, if you will, a real central gathering place. And it had also office buildings and shopping centers and food services and theaters and so on. And then just around that was the neighborhood unit designed for 1,100 families and 4,400 inhabitants. And these smaller units had elementary schools, shopping, and community buildings, single family and row houses, and apartments. And then a detailed model of his plan here. You see 2 views of it, and his belief that organic city planning has been based on human needs, and therefore its social basis too is sound. And if people will actively participate in its development, a healthy urban environment can be achieved. In 1947, when he, after serving the Army and when he was with SOM, he and 2 other colleagues at SOM entered the Jefferson National Expansion Memorial Competition. And here you see their entry number 25, and it featured a soaring concrete tower with a 40-foot tall statue of Thomas Jefferson beneath it, and it would be uplit, so Jefferson's shadow would be cast on this tall tower. And here's a plan view of that competition drawing, and to either side of the monument, projecting out into the river, sculptural gardens, one commemorating the past, one commemorating the future. I might say also it's interesting to see that Gyo had connected physically the arch grounds with the old courthouse, and that's something we've only just realized within the last few years. While Gyo was working for Helmuth Yamasaki Lineweber in Detroit, he spent a great deal of time in St. Louis, and this is his home and for he and his family in 1951 to 54. And this is 829 Providence Avenue in Webster Groves, and it's simply a half a block from the house on Summit at 540 Summit where his brother lived. So again, that sense of being close to your family, especially after having been separated, is very strong here. So within a half a block walk, the Obata family could get together. And it's such a humble little, beautiful little house. And I can't help but think the thoughts that were emanating from within that house as he was planning, for the terminal for Lambert Airport. So Then a few years later, in 1953, he designed and built a second home, their first home of their own. And this is at 915 Greeley Avenue in Webster Groves. A beautiful home which orients to the street and to the south, admitting abundant daylight. Really a wonderful place. The homeowner was nice enough to, I spoke with her and she allowed me to step inside for a few moments. And it's really a very serene and pleasant space. It's a split level arrangement, but the amount of daylight pouring into that room was quite wonderful across the south face of the building. And it's interesting that this was built 2 years prior to HOK being formed. Here are some historical photographs of the house circa 1959. And here you can see in these black and white photos what it looked like when it was originally designed and furnished. And it reminds one again of thinking about something in the next larger context, a chair in the room, a room in the house, a house in an environment. And as I looked at this house, and by the way, it was also featured in Architectural Record Houses of 1959. But as I looked at the proportions and the composition of the house, I realized it was composed of 5 squares. And so it's interesting to see that strong geometry and sense of proportion at work here. Also in 1955, there was a competition, the Missouri House Design Competition, and it was to stir the imagination of young architects to plan small modern suburban homes and very individual and functional art forms. And this was done by the National Society of Arts and Letters, St. Louis chapter, a women's organization dedicated to art, music, literature, and drama. And it's interesting that their program was for 3 bedrooms, no basement, 1,250 square feet on a 75 by 125 foot lot. And in it, actually, the first prize went to 2 architects, Tom Baer and Chester Romer. Chester Romer was an original architectural member of HOK. And so it's interesting to see his early works and the fact that he won first prize in the upper left-hand corner. And also, it was also entered by George Ansel-Vickius and Gyo Obata. And here you see this elegant, low-sloped, beautifully proportioned residence with a wonderful flow between indoors and outdoors. You would just love to live here if you could, and love to see it built. And it was interesting because we know of George Ansel-Vickius as the dean of Washington University School of Architecture, 1968 to 73, but they had actually met at SOM in 1947, Gyo and George. So they became great friends from that point forward. Here you can see the elegant plans, not 1 square inch of wasted space in this plan, quite an elegant solution. And it was a very distinguished jury, I might add as well, with Harris Armstrong, William Adair Bernuti, Frederick Dunn, Robert Elkington, and Kurt Pursley. So at any rate, very high marks to be judged by. In 1960, Gyo continued designing some beautiful residences, and this is one for John L. Wilson at 29 Trent Drive. Mr. Wilson was a financial officer at Anheuser-Busch. And so at any rate, this beautiful, again, this gently reposed low slope roof with a very, very large deck facing to the east, but again, a very serene place. I went by to see it just a short while ago, and it still looks as just as fresh as the day it was built. This large deck might be explained by the fact that it's across from a putting green at the end of a long fairway at Old Warson. So at any rate, quite a beautiful sighting and a very direct response to the design of this house. And here are a few photos that I took the other day. And as I say, quite a stunning and beautifully fresh building. And note that the deck has an opening in it with this large tree allowed to grow right through it. Also of note, Al Alper was a structural engineer, and I had the good fortune of working with Al and his son Mark over the years. And also the interior designer, Eleanor Lemaire, was an interior designer for this project, but she also recommended Gyo to Stanley Marcus for a much larger project later on. The second house for the Obata family was at 10042 Litzinger Road, sadly no longer standing, but you can see again this rich variety of interior spaces, a beautiful plaster walls and ceiling finishes, little sort of nooks and crannies with a beautiful library alcove in there with built-in seating and so on, and a balcony overlooking. So, and dramatically sited. It would be lovely to see this building still standing. And with that, the founding of HOK 1955 and the three partners here in this early photograph 68 years ago. And with the founding of HOK, George Helmuth had a very strong idea, and that was organize the office for maximum efficiency by giving each of the three major partners a separate function: design, production, or marketing. And I can't help but think of the three-legged stool analogy here, that the importance of each one of those functions needs to be strong and sturdy for that stool to remain standing. And each one of those partners certainly did that. But not only did he have that idea, but he also had several other concepts for running a depression-proof office, which he outlined in a 23-page single-space memorandum post-World War II when he was working at Smith, Hinchman and Grills in Detroit, Michigan. And he proposed this to the officers of that company. But in it, he said, never depend on just one building type, diversify in location, expand into architectural subspecialties, set up a thoroughly systematic marketing group, put effort into a professional public relations, and organize the office for maximum efficiency, design, production, and marketing. And this is the blueprint for HOK that we know today. With that, here is a view of the first major project for the firm in 1951 to 56, St. Louis Lambert International Airport. And really a beautiful, simple, timeless, elegant structure. I would point out in this design model, note that there are no upturned beams where the cross vaults intersect. And that was a desire of Yamasaki and Gyo, and Gyo to this, he just always was disappointed that they couldn't achieve that if that's in this building. Yamasaki thought about this airport terminal, our airport terminal, in terms of Grand Central Station. And that when he was traveling in New York as a commuter, he would always felt that excitement of arrival into the city in this great hall. And then he said, he reasoned, if we could create a great room at St. Louis, perhaps those who arrive here would begin their experience in this city in an exhilarating way. So that's the idea of behind this terminal, is that of Grand Central Station. And here you see some early photographs of the terminal, and it's beautifully elegant original form. Wonderful walkways that you could go out and watch the flights as they were boarding and leaving and so on. And an aerial view here, and you can see the upturned beams at the intersections of those cross vaults that were not originally intended in the design. A couple of views of the interior and under construction as well as finished. And you might note also in the lower right hand and in the far left hand, lower left, the Harry Bertoya Cranbrook Academy of Art designer who designed a beautiful sculpture screen. The maquette is still in the St. Louis Art Museum. Unfortunately, the original was lost over time through many renovations at the airport. And then in 1965, a fourth dome was added, which you see here with its fresh copper roof on it. But it made quite a statement, and in terms of its aviation and aerodynamics, a formal statement here, and really set the bar very high. And it's important in terms of context to note that JFK, the design of the International Airport Trans World Airlines Terminal, wasn't designed until 56 to 62 by Eero Saarinen. So our airport terminal predated this and preceded this beautiful structure of thin shell concrete as well. The first school, 1956, Bristol Primary School at 222 West Cedar Avenue. This addressed the post-war need for classrooms, as well as providing innovative ways to creatively share collaborative teaching spaces. So there was a large central space here with classrooms that fronted onto that space. And this all-purpose space in the center used for physical education, assembly, and theater, and then surrounded by four other classrooms along with offices, kitchen, and teachers' rooms. But a very elegant design to begin with. Here's the approach, the auto drop-off here with an elegant canopy that reaches out. And note the beautiful landscaping both the mature trees that were left in place as well as new. This was designed by Emmett Layton, a landscape architect. And Doris Dana, FAIA, told me the other day that this was her first project working with Emmett Layton, landscape architect, and she remembered it quite fondly. Here's a view of the approach underneath this beautiful canopy with the main building straight ahead, and then the smaller kindergarten classrooms off to the right-hand side. HOK went on to have a whole series of school designs. This happens to be Warson Primary School, now Rohan Woods School in Warson Woods, 1550 Bennett Avenue, with a beautiful lamella roof truss, not unlike our early design for the hockey arena that is no longer standing, the Checker Dome. But they went on to design the Warson Primary School, the St. Thomas Aquinas High School, Riverview Gardens High School, and then in 1960, Kirksville High School, and then Stager Junior High, Villa de Chêne, the student activity building there, and of course the Priory School, Berkeley Junior High School, and Temple Israel Synagogue and School in 1962. 1959 brought forth the Employment Security Building, and this is an excellent example of a new formalism in style, and one that Minoru Yamasaki was a great proponent of. It takes modern elements, but then treats them in a more classical way. So this beautiful pattern of columns and exaggerated column capitals, inverted pyramids, if you will, march down the street in a very formal way, but a very modern way. And these is a reinforced concrete structure, open floor plates, columns are clad in granite, black granite base, and travertine marble spandrels. And it's currently under renovation right now, and we're grateful for that. These are some original floor plans that you see here and elevations. And note that there's a dark brick that surrounds the building on the west side and the north side, leaving the south and the east sides open for that fenestration. So in red, you see the support functions that have been placed up against the party wall of the neighboring building and a parking lot to the right, thus allowing for a wide open workspace, open office situation here. So Gyo arranged it to the absolute maximum efficiency to get the most out of that floor plate. This is a view of the interior now with the drop ceiling now removed. The floor is terrazzo. It's being revealed and restored by removing these carpet tiles. And actually these column capitals were also light reflectors for wall sconces, which we'll see right here. So these beautiful wall sconces are being restored as well, and they will help uplight and turn those column capitals into light reflectors and light fixtures in and of themselves. And then there was an escalator that led up to the second floor. It was then replaced with a stair, which you see in the middle photograph. By its removal, it revealed a really interesting mechanical system, and it's sort of an omnidirectional within the floor slab HVAC system ductwork that allows you to go in any direction and then open up with a floor vent if you need to. And then these floor vents, these forms are actually still being produced, so they're able to acquire a few more of them now for this restoration project. Moving on to 1962 in the St. Louis Abbey and the chapel there, an elegant, just a stunningly beautiful building, circular church, and one that really put HOK on the map. Designed for the monks from Appleforth Abbey, Yorkshire, England, Father Luke, Father Timothy, and Father Columba. And this was done in arrived from a Gothic tradition, if you will, in a very contemporary modern term. It really made waves, as I say, and Time Magazine noted that it was the newest and perhaps most striking round church in the U.S. in a 1962 article. Architectural Digest also cited it as one of America's greatest hidden treasures. But there's a series of side chapels that surround this, and then the three levels here that you see of arches and the central nave. And what's interesting about this is that this idea was conceived of before Vatican II, when the church said, let's bring worshipers closer to the altar. This was already anticipated with the design of this beautiful space here. And so wonderful, flooded with the beautiful natural light through the cow wall arches, the panels around the perimeter. A visitor from Europe, an architect from Europe, called it a three-dimensional Gothic arch. Quite an appropriate definition. But here you see the stunning view looking straight up, as well as the plan and cross section of the church itself. Pierre Luigi Nervi, honorary FAIA, was a design consultant for this project as well, and helped with the design of this elegant thin-shelled concrete structure. And here you see it in receiving the light in so many different ways, and shadow, and as well as reflected light. And the story behind this construction is quite fascinating, and McCarthy Brothers Construction really are to be commended for their innovative approach. The story was that they actually, when they received the drawings for bids, actually threw them into the trash can because they didn't think it could be built. And then Patty McCarthy came along, pulled those plans out of the trash can and thought about it and said, I think we can do it if we create a series of reusable plywood forms. And then we apply the dry concrete to that and form that thin shelled concrete. So here you see the beginnings of the reusable plywood forms. And here you see them in process, in place in the right-hand side. In the lower right, you can see one of the forms being removed after the concrete has set. And on the upper right, you see a massive amount of reinforcing steel. I've been told 2 to 3 times as much reinforcing steel went into this building, just because, again, there are certain doubts about will it stand or not. So it's really quite engineered very strongly. But it is also a building that is, I will say, handmade, if you will, hand formed, and in this, as you put the dry concrete on there so it doesn't slump up, the workmen were actually forming this by hand, and the edges of this are literally 2.5 to 3 inches thick. So very, very elegant thin edge, if you will. And then here's Father Timothy Horner in front of the construction. And you can see it's still wide open before the infill cow wall panels to enclose it. The steeple is just recently completed above there. By the way, Father Timothy Horner always liked to tell us about the poem "Little Jack Horner sat in a corner eating his skirts and whey," and he's related to that English citizen. So just a little bit of a side story there. That was his relative. Oh boy. Apologies. Okay. So at any rate, hopefully everybody can see the screen again. Here is a view of the interior and exterior, and it's quite interesting to see how dark the cow wall panels look on the exterior, and on the interior they glow so beautifully, almost like a shoji screen. And also, when a cloud passes in front of the sun, this space literally breathes in and out. It's quite phenomenal. The altar is something of quite an elegant study as well. It's 7 tons of solid granite, and here you see Father Gregory Mormon standing at the altar. And note how the base curves inward at the base of this solid granite altar. That is done so that the priest, there's no toe kick required, so to speak. You can stand there right up next to the altar, rather than having the typical recessed, toe kick that you see so often. So a very elegant, subtle statement of this 7-ton granite altar. Side altars surround this, where priests would say mass every day, the monks would. And then the glass screen by Emil Fry, which is behind the choir, which has vertical panels which can be could be rotated. And here's one of the classes that we had on mid-century modern. Andrew Ramus and I co-founded and co-taught mid-century modern architecture in St. Louis. And Gyo always would accept our request to come and speak to the students and answer their questions, explaining the design, and we will be forever grateful to that wonderful experience. Here he is on April 26, 2012, with the 50th anniversary of the completion of the St. Louis Abbey. And again, a view looking up the hilltop. Temple Israel the same year, not too far away on Ladue Road, is composed of the sanctuary, the worship space, which you see six-sided, and then a rectangular block for classes, and they are connected by a bridge which spans a creek that runs through the site. A respect for nature working alongside of it, and the worship space is also expandable for High Holy Days. Of course, the planetarium is an absolutely stunning, iconic building on our skyline in Forest Park, and one that we all treasure, originating from 1963. And interestingly, it received a PA awards from a jury that was composed of William Caudell, Lou Kahn, Ralph Rapson, Jose Luis Serratin, and Lyndon Welch. And so this is, it served its purpose for many, many years. It has had numerous various alterations and interior renovations and rework as it became part of the St. Louis Science Center. But it shows that this thin-shelled dramatic form is very adaptable to future uses. The Cook School of 1964, an elementary school and one of the only schools that Gyo designed for the public school system, St. Louis public school system, is on 5935 Horton Place. And I had the privilege of doing some research and interviewing Gyo about this. And it is a really powerful statement about an efficient, a very compact layout with the classrooms on the upper two floors, administration and support functions on the first two floors, and the kindergarten is located on the very first floor, adjacent to the sunken courtyard. These are the plans that you see, again, with a very, very, very efficient upper two levels, not an ounce of wasted space whatsoever. And Gyo described it as sort of nesting it three-dimensionally to achieve maximum efficiency. And here you can see a few views of the building as it was in 2017 when we visited. The gymnasium, a two-story volume, and then there's two floors of administrative space off to the right. And a sort of a split level arrangement as one enters into the building here. That project led to 1967, Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. And in this, there was an important meeting, a planning meeting for environmental design that included Buckminster Fuller and Edmund Bacon and Hideo Sasaki and Paulo Soleri, Sybil Moholy-Nagy, quite a powerful group to talk about the future plans for this campus. In this, this was a commuter campus at the time, and it organized about a central quadrangle with the student center, library, administration, and auditorium, all organized around that central courtyard space placed upon this hilltop. The interest here is that it's very functionally laid out for flexibility. The fixed elements, the stair cores, and so on, and elevators were placed in these brick towers so that the buildings themselves could be rearranged as need be. And when I see the precast concrete panels with the sort of the pink granite finish and the brick, I think back to the Cook School that we just saw. This is a classic little gem from 1967, the American Zinc Building at 20 South 4th Street on a very modest site. It was about 60 feet wide and about 170 feet long. And Ray Witkoff was a developer and a philanthropist who contacted Gyo and asked for a design on this tiny little site. And so to maximize this design, Gyo raised everything up. He placed the support functions alongside the building to the north, and then created a clear span of 50 feet. And it was supported on Virendale trusses that you see here on the south facade. And the plan is in the upper left. And again, if you think about what we just saw with the Employment Security Building, the services of the building are placed right up against the blank party wall, thus allowing a beautiful column-free, wide-open office plan to be arranged, and it's 50 feet wide and 120 feet long. So you get 6,000 square feet of uninterrupted space planning on this beautiful building. He had hoped to make it out of zinc, but that material was not available at the time, so he went with stainless steel, very appropriate as its neighbor is the Gateway Arch. It's good to be working on a Saturday, and in 1969, Neiman Marcus came through because of a call from them to Gyo's office, and they wanted to talk to an architect who was working all the time, hardworking, not just 8 to 5 on a Monday through Friday. So Gyo took the call, and that project came through the office. It's also interesting in terms of the connections, again, because the word of mouth, because of that house for John Wilson and the interior designer Eleanor Lemaire, she encouraged Stanley Marcus to give Gyo a call about this project. And with that, Neiman Marcus of 1969 came about in Houston, Texas. And here you see the view of the final building here. And Gyo thought of this as a treasure house, and gave it a much larger floor to ceiling height of 25 feet. And then the window panels that you see here are of onyx marble as well. So using some precious materials to reinforce the idea of a treasure house. The Galleria of 1970 in Houston, Texas, a very, very large project, all about design of movement and light. And in it, it also was about moving people within its very spacious skylit retail center. And so the anchors are at each end, Neiman Marcus off to the right, Marshall Field off to the left, and then with Croth circulation added to that. And then as an inspiration for the Galleria, thinking of Rockefeller Center with its ice skating rink, and then the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele in Milan, Italy, that magnificent urban setting, were combined into the Galleria here that you see with this ice skating rink and a wonderful people watching and a special feature to draw visitors into this complex. 1972 brought Anthony's Restaurant and Bar, and this is a classic space, one of the truly great interiors. And Gyo explained to me that it was a square room within a cubic volume. And so if you see it, you know, at the very center, that stainless steel column there that's supporting the glasses, that's actually an HVAC cool air duct in the very center, disguised beautifully. And then the trays that hold the glasses, and then the center island, and then the square oak, white oak bar within a square room within a cubic volume. So again, that idea of thinking about the next idea within the scale as you move upward within the space, as Elio Saarinen promoted. Here's a view of that, the square bar off of the garden court, and the 2-story volume of that of Anthony's bar there. And many, many wonderful lunches at this place here. And then across the way is the restaurant in red. And in this, lighting is so very crucial. And the Alvar Aalto lights, the pendant lights right over the table with the white linen and the dark background, you feel as though you were the only diners within that room. And so again, a wonderful place to have a dining experience. And while you can see all the tables there, believe me, when you're there experiencing it, you're only aware of those around you and your table. Again, thinking about designing the thing, considering the next larger context, here are the, I'll call them bookends, framing the old courthouse, and with the Equitable Building off to the right, 1971, and the Boatman's Bank Tower off to the left. And I've highlighted in red how the podiums have been brought down to just a 2-story height, beautifully framing, holding the street, but also framing the old courthouse in a beautiful urban design. And here you see the Equitable Tower with its reflective glass reflecting its urban surroundings and the sky. And then to the north, slightly different variation with individual windows within the aluminum skin of the Boatman's Bank Tower. 1973, Bristol Myers Squibb Company in Lawrenceville, New Jersey, near Princeton. Beautiful campus design here, all about site orientation, movement, light, and landscaping, and how people move into and through and arrive at the building. And then it's creating an inspiring place to meet and mix and create. You'll note this water feature here, this nice lake, and the dining for those that are working on the campus at the campus here. They're almost at water level, looking out as they're dining out to this wonderful pastoral setting and lakefront view. Palo Alto Research Center, 1975, a fascinating, very intricate project, one where this is where the personal computer was invented, along with graphical user interface, laser printing, and the first commercial mouse. But it's a very, very long, low building, and one that Gyo wanted to step down the hillside, but also natural light was very important to bring into the workplace here. And with that, there was a series of courtyards, light wells, if you will, that were created to introduce natural light into the interior of the building. And here you see one of those courtyards, and off to the left, an enlarged portion of the plan. And the goal here is for the scientists to have natural light into this courtyard and then be within a few steps of a lab space that needed no light whatsoever. And so a very complicated three-dimensional solution, but a very elegant one that provides the natural light, access to the labs, and a sense of community. And again, improving the quality of lives of those who work here. And here you see the terraced hillside of them. It's a man-made terraced hillside out of the buildings, if you will. So it also had a less of an impact to the neighboring area. The National Air and Space Museum of 1976 was all about moving people through the space, the display of these great aircraft of our history, and using natural northern daylight, and as well as the views out to the mall to orient visitors as they walked through the building. 50,000 visitors a day. It's one of the most visited museums in the world. And here you see a plan view, a very simple diagrammatic view, the roof plan above, and these bold forms as they march down the street. So for a large building, the scale of it is really articulated quite beautifully. Here are the planes being supported within the glass atrium spaces on full view, not only from within, but from outside. Another view looking at that great spaces. And even when it's more solid along Independence Avenue, it's still a powerful architectural form. Moscone Center, 1981. Here is a task to create a 640,000 square foot museum, convention center, but have it less impactful on the city. So in effect, how can you do that? The idea here was to place it underground, creating an elevated plaza. So as patrons attend the various conventions, they descend down escalators into this column-free space to see these various exhibits. Levi Plaza, 1982, a very artfully planned corporate office building. And this was designed to sort of reunite and bring the working community back together again. One of the strategies is to do that with these glass atriums that unite two halves of each building. It's also focusing around a wonderful outdoor plaza. But here's an example of one of those atriums for people to see those arriving and departing and have a conversation coming and going. And as I say, with a beautiful landscape by Lawrence Halprin, landscape architect. And I find it fascinating as you look up to Telegraph Hill and Coit Tower and see the scale of what is a large office building, but it's so beautifully broken down by the stair stepping of the corners of the building, creating these roof terraces, dramatically reducing the visual impact and scale of the building relative to the neighborhood up the hill. And it's interesting to see that Bill Valentine wrote that it was lucky for all of us that Gyo was quite competitive, because at one point it looked like HOK was not going to get this project, but Gyo suggested, let's have a competition. And of course, HOK won, and the project went on to great success and much publication. An aerial view of the complex here, as you can see, and again, a very artful design in terms of an environment in a city plan. So beautifully integrated, as Eliel Saarinen would have taught Gyo many years earlier. The Dallas Galleria, 1983, for Gerald Hines, a very dense development, almost a city within itself, with shopping, offices, and hotel. And it was all about movement of the cars and parking and getting people to and from. and in and around this very, very large retail complex. Again, with a great skylight roof, barrel vaulted, and an ice skating rink as a feature to attract visitors. The King Khalid International Airport in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, one of the very, very largest projects, 70,000 acres for this airport, 4 terminals, 2 domestic and 2 international, and a royal terminal and a mosque for 5,000 worshipers. And this was done at a time when there was a recession going on in the US and in St. Louis, and wisely HOK said we need to move beyond our borders and try to attract work across the seas. And this resulted here. And so this is a very powerful design, and one that blends the contemporary architecture with references to Islamic architecture, this being the mosque in the center. And here you see the magnificent interior space, beautifully detailed for gathering and worship. And then this is the interior of one of the terminals, and a garden was created, a garden oasis here as you arrive into this capital and kingdom as you pass through, having departed from your flight. Another project, King Saud University, also in Riyadh, with a very massive project again, and heavily influenced by the climate itself, as well as educational planning, as well as materials available. And here you see the overall plan of this building and complex with spines for circulation, shaded devices allowing people to walk from classroom to classroom, building to building. Precast concrete was used for this project because that was the most readily available material and could be produced on site. But again, Gyo refers to his mentor, Eliel Saarinen, in talking about having such a positive influence and that relationship of every element of design, integrating the smallest to the largest. And that's why he said that he always was interested in working on large scale projects. It was based upon his early experience with Eliel. Again, magnificent floor patterns, respectful of the Islamic tradition, but done in a contemporary way. Kellogg Company headquarters in Battle Creek, Michigan, 1986. A total work of architecture and landscape. Every part thought about and integrated beautifully. This came about after the CEO of the building said he would build it here if the city and the county would come together and unite as one. And here you see again the idea of atriums that are joining the two halves of the building, forming social interactive spaces, beautifully daylit, welcoming, and so on. And a view of the building relative to the park that was developed on this campus. So a great place to attract top talent to work here within the heart of the city and alongside the Battle Creek. And an aerial view of that showing the corner stair stepping again, not unlike the Levi building in San Francisco. 1987, Congregation B'nai Emunah relocated to West County from University City. And in this, you can see the natural daylight within the stair-stepping clear story over the worship space. That's how the natural light is brought in. This was to connect to the ethereal with the earthly realms and inspire worshipers in their sacred space and move them to return again and again. This building was to be of the earth, not soaring. Here's a view of the interior worship space. And taking a lesson from Eric Mendelssohn's original B'nai Emunah in University City, this space is able to expand for High Holy Days. So on the lower left, there's a diagram with a red wall. That's a temporary movable wall. And on High Holy Days, that can be removed and the worship space dramatically increased in capacity. Here you see within the worship space, the Torah shrine, the Ark, the candelabra, and the Ten Commandments, which were all relocated from B'nai Emunah Synagogue in University City. And with that, I'd take you real quickly to a tour of that building from 1946 to 50, the first work of Eric Mendelssohn in our city and in the United States, actually. And in here, you see the worship space with this great west-facing clerestory window that brought in the last rays of daylight before the High Holy Day commences at sundown. And in it, this was the first modern synagogue planned. And you see the place of worship, the temple, the house of God. And then there's an assembly place, the house of the people. And then the school for education, the house of the Torah, that's in green. But knowing about the need for expansion for High Holy Days, the temple was able to expand into the assembly space by removable walls. So that is a feature that has continued to be used in many modern synagogues, including the one by HOK. So here you see again the worship space and the Torah shrine as it was originally positioned, and then as it is today. And it's really a treat to get to go see this in person, to see this magnificent design by Eric Mendelson housed within this new worship space. But beautifully, beautifully crafted in the candelabra here and the Ten Commandments. Another place of worship, 1993 Community of Christ World Headquarters. And this is in Independence, Missouri, and a very, very striking building form against the skyline, as you see it spiraling upwards towards 300 feet in height. And it takes its plan form and three-dimensional form from the idea of a shell. And here you see these shells in nature's form below. And when you think of this shell, it's also based upon a rather interesting mathematical formula and has to do with proportion, which has been studied in architecture over the millennium. And in it, we think of things like the Fibonacci series. And that is simply put 1 and 1 is 2, 2 and 1 is 3, 3 and 2 is 5, and so on and so forth. And when you apply those numbers, the diagrams off to the right, you form these squares. And those squares, if you make arcs, radiuses within each one of those squares, you wind up with this beautiful spiral. So it's a magnificent formula and found in nature at the smallest scale within a seashell and all the way up to the spiral nebula. So to me, it's sort of an eternal truth and really one that reaches to the heavens, both physically and spiritually. And so here you see that idea of proportion of the golden ratio, the golden section, the golden mean, the golden spiral, the divine proportion. It has many, many names, but the seashell whirl, the mollusk, and the spiral nebula all on the same formula. And when you think that's been translated three-dimensionally into the community of church world headquarters, it's really quite stunning and quite breathtaking. And I've been told by many friends who worked at HOK in those days, this could not have been built any way, shape, or form without the use of the modern technology of computer generating the formulas to find these places in points in space. And for that, Bob Stockdale should be credited greatly for his contribution, as he was a computer whiz in the office and really helped Gyo and the whole team to determine the geometry of this beautiful space. But it truly is a spiral that reaches up to heaven. It's a modern day cathedral that reaches up to God. And here you see a view of the worship space on the right and that spiraling central ceiling space with clerestory light wrapping around and bringing natural light within the space. And a view from above, as you can see that pattern fully realized. The Florida Aquarium, 1995 in Tampa. And here is an idea of taking and wrapping around an environment, around a living world of fish and plants. It too is based upon nature and the use of the design of a shell. And here you see the plan view of the roof of the aquarium off to the left and the seashell up to the right. And here you see really an immersive experience of passing through a tunnel of being allowed to look underwater at all the various life forms swimming by in this very dramatic space within the aquarium. The Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, the headquarters and operations center is on the banks of the Mississippi River. And this, again, a very large team from HOK working on this. And one of the key strategies here was to create a program that accommodated both the industrial processes of checks, coins, and bills, and the office operations, the office management side of things, and all the while bringing them together in a central community space and opening it up, positioning the building so that you would have more of a view towards the Mississippi River. And so here you can see that green lawn leading one in terraces stepping down to the banks of the Mississippi River. And here is the organization of the building with offices to the right-hand side, the operations off to the left, more of an industrial process, and that's able to be expanded. And then in the center is the dining and meeting area for the staff to come together and work. Even if you're on one half of the building or the other, it doesn't mean you can't meet during the daytime. So it's that social interaction that was so important to Gyo in the design of improving the quality of one's life wherever you were, wherever you worked. Here's a view from the Mississippi River and the bridge looking back towards the complex. And one of that terraced lawn leading down to the river. Boeing Leadership Center in Florissant, Missouri. And here you see a project that has got quite a stunning setting overlooking the Missouri River, in this case on a bluff top looking towards the west. And it's a place for the company's leaders to come together and discuss business and new concepts. And in it, I have to say, as you look at these series of pavilions with the guest rooms off to the left and the assembly and auditorium space off to the right, I think of the phrase "all things are solved by walking," attributed to St. Augustine. But one must think, if people were here, executives to have discussions about the future of the company, to just the informal gathering as you walk the hallway and as you make your way over together. I think about how many conversations must have happened just along that hallway, even before one got to the meeting rooms. But beautifully sited and the scale broken down by these individual wings for, in this case, the guest rooms and bay windows, bow windows for community gatherings within each wing. And then the dramatic setting looking out to the west and northwest of the Missouri River and beyond the Mississippi River Valley there. So at one, a beautiful relationship with the site. To the west in 1999, the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles, California. And here a very elegant design by Gyo, which is intended to, this design is intended to record the incarceration of 120,000 Japanese Americans from the West Coast cities during World War II, but also to showcase art and culture and legacy of Japanese Americans, including Issei, first generation, to keep traditions alive and for the youth to understand their heritage. And the idea here is of one of an image of connecting curves, the two cultures coming together at a common meeting point. And here that's beautifully reflected in Gyo's sketches for the form and massing of this building. Two cultures coming together at a common meeting point. And the interiors and the exterior are beautifully composed, rich materials, soft lighting, very thoughtfully designed and detailed, very calm spaces. Here back in St. Louis in 1999, the Missouri History Museum, Emerson Center. And here is the bow-shaped modern building facing towards Forest Park as it adjoins its historical neighbor to the north. And with that, here's a plan diagram of the museum within the Great Circle. And this is the new museum added onto the original and connected by glass links and glass lobby, all on the center line of the original building. And here you see the great connecting hallway, the two-story high space with the Spirit of St. Louis mounted and hung from above, and the symbolic river in the floor pattern there, designed and implemented by Gyo Obata. But at any rate, a beautiful resolution between old and new, and bringing a new museum to life here and expanding it. And it is very valued and much used and loved by our community. Again, this view of the sweeping glass facing towards the south with its sunscreens curving in response to its circular site. The Thomas Eagleton Courthouse of 2000, the design idea to create dignified courtrooms and a building to reflect democracy. The stainless steel dome atop this tower is in reference to the Gateway Arch and its stainless steel construction. Within it, as you arrive, a very dramatic and powerful multi-story interior lobby space, tall columns, precast concrete materials, and so on. But a very impressive arrival, to say the least. And then once you find your way into the courtrooms, and it's a very intricate system, as you can imagine, of circulation of people's judges, lawyers, and prisoners to and within the courthouse. It's a very complex design to have to resolve. But the courtrooms are quite eloquently done, two-story courtrooms with views towards the city and towards the Gateway Arch here. And a more inward focusing courtroom here, very dignified, rich wood interiors and shallow domed ceiling. And then various offices in a more standard, typical floor to floor height here. The courtrooms are 2 stories high, and these are 2 floors worth of these for each courtroom composition. So here again, views back to the city, always important to relate one to and orient one to their surroundings. The Center for Advanced Medicine 2001, the idea here was to bring all the various outpatient services into one convenient location, but then also to think of it as a medical building more like a hotel than a typical medical building. And so one that's bright and inviting and wayfinding more intuitive. So here you see the auto drop-off area, not unlike you might find at a grand hotel as you arrive undercover and find your way into a bright daylit semicircular waiting area on the way into the towers. And then beautiful atriums, top-lit atriums to introduce natural lighting into the interiors of the buildings. The 2002 Raj U.S. Courthouse in Denver, Colorado, an environmentally sensitive design here, one that achieved LEED ratings as well, but also one that expresses a justice system in a democracy: openness, freedom, light, truth, and justice. So this is a very welcoming, glassy reception area on your way into and up into the courthouse building. And here you see an aerial view of this along with the model and the planning. And as I mentioned, it was LEED Gold, certified in 2003. But the other thing, so besides this glass entry pavilion being more approachable as the jury assembles and so on, the tower itself, you have places to wait alongside the glassy hallways here as you wait and make your way into the judges' chambers and deliberation rooms and offices and courtrooms and so on. So a very user-friendly kind of building, and one that's oriented to views to the out of doors towards the south and so on. Closer to home again, 2005, the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum in Springfield, Illinois. And with this new presidential library and museum, it's just a couple of blocks away from the old state capitol. And so outlined in red here are is a study model of the proposed museum building and library. And you can see its relationship here with the dome of the old state capitol, the circular cupola, and the new building referencing those forms, the circular cupola and dome of the old capitol within the new museum. And here is the main lobby leading into the museum space with clear story lighting, abundant natural day lighting as one has a multiple choices leading off into various exhibit halls from this central location. Closer home still again, 2005, the Farrell Learning and Teaching Center at the Washington University School of Medicine. And this was to be a new light-filled heart for the medical school itself. And in it, space was captured between 2 existing buildings in a former street. And so you have this interesting dialogue between new and old, and what was once a street is now enclosed into an atrium space. And the idea here, again, is to provide these classroom spaces and places to congregate and meet for the students. So close to the high-tech lecture halls and laboratories and classrooms and study areas, as well as social spaces within that two-story atrium space in the former street itself. And these are a place where a student might meet a doctor going to and from. 2010, the Centene Plaza tower in Clayton, and designed to be an urban place for people to work and enjoy, and an office building, a gathering place, shops, restaurants, and outdoor attractions. And here you see it, the building form holding the corner here, and the use of the glass with some glass fritting as well for solar control. There was a photograph that was shared with me by Lance Cage, who made a trip with Gyo Obata and also Bob Clark of Clayco and folks from SOM, and who were visiting World Trade Center Tower number 7, newly completed, to better understand how the glass systems were working in that building, and they used those lessons to come back and apply them towards the Centene Plaza. So again, it's just a testimony to Gyo being ever curious and seeing with his own 2 eyes what was out there in the world, and how to avail himself to the latest technologies. Here's a site plan of the complex, and you can see here the highlight of the portion that was the first phase that was built with the tower holding the corner, retail alongside Forsyth, courtyard between that, and then also phase 1 of a parking structure.
John?
Yes.
Excuse me, we got about 5 minutes left, just letting you know.
I have 7:51.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to wrap it up. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's the connecting canopy leading. It's a work of art by Liam Gillick, and again, transforming what you're seeing through the use of colored lenses, lobby spaces of the building, and a magnificent animated screen. The screen moves with winds as they blow through, and the tower itself. The last one is the Great American Building at the Queen City Square in Cincinnati. A very powerful top, if you will, sort of a tiara, if you will, referring back to the Queen City, and quite a stunning profile on the city itself. And I love the interaction between the top of the tower and the chandelier in the lobby space itself. I'll wrap up here real quickly with his own Gyo's personal residence at 32 Overhills in Ladue. And here you can see a barn which was rebuilt and restored, and a new house in the yellow stucco. The barn is a wonderful place for family gatherings and celebrations, and this is the interiors of the house, beautifully daylit, and a photo of Gyo here from 2017, and the kitchen gathering space, and the meditation room above in the tower. The entry hall is really quite stunning, and it's one that contains the Petoskey stones from visits up to Michigan, and this was installed by his wife Courtney Obata. And in thinking about this, those stones wash up on the Lake Michigan shoreline here, and this is in Leland, and these Petoskey's that Gyo would find and love to have in his pocket to remind him of the beauty of Michigan. These are the close-ups of a Petoskey stone, which I found up there over visits up there. And it's actually the coral formations that were made 360 million years ago when Michigan was underwater and south of the equator. And it eventually moved to its current location. So these are very, very ancient stones. And he came to love Michigan because Chester Romer, if you recall, who worked on the Saudi projects, has a summer home here, and invited Gyo to come up and vacation and get some R&R. And Gyo did that and fell in love with the place. And this is a view out from that home, so you can see why Gyo would love that. And here you see these are some memorial medals that were given to Chester for his service on these projects from the client. So with that, Scott Romer, who is a friend, our family is now related to the Romers through marriage. One of our sons is married to his grandniece, Chester's grandniece. So we visit there, and I asked Scott if he had ever been up to Gyo's house, and he said he had back in high school days under construction, but we managed to find it. And here it is, this beautiful home alongside Lake Michigan. And Gyo was very welcoming and allowed us in, and we were able to catch up a little bit and take in the beauty of that beautiful setting. So with that, I will just wrap up by saying Gyo always said this firm is going places, and how true. And also that he did a lot of designing on planes because he was on those planes a lot, going from place to place. And Bill Helmuth talking about Gyo originating the design culture of HOK, giving it a humility and humanity to everything they do. And Bill Valentine talking about the Obata legacy, which Gyo both taught and practiced: work hard, center on our clients, and listen carefully. And that they are all in love, in awe of Gyo and what he did for the firm and his philosophy. And with that, this firm was founded seemingly a mere 68 years ago. So as Gyo would say, listen very carefully, understand what people want, work hard, and find the best ways to enhance the quality of life around you. And as was remembered by Max Obata in the memorial service last year, it really moved me when he remembered an interview of Gyo by the St. Louis Post-Dispatch when he was asked about the internment camps and all, and he just simply said, "All prejudice is so stupid. I think what we have to do is work all the time to reject profiling and make the world a safe place for everybody." So, as Max said, Gyo's basic rule: just be kind to people. And with that, I thank you very much. And I thank all of those who've contributed their thoughts and ideas to this. And I will conclude here. I'm sorry I went a bit long, just a mere 4 minutes left.
Thank you so much, John. That was a wonderful talk. I think we all learned a lot. It was great. I hope to see you all back next month. We'll be have a talk on March 28th. So look forward to seeing you then. And I hope everyone has a good evening. Good night.
Good night.